The cheap polyester of the sleeveless red dress felt like a second skin made of shame. Amelia smoothed it down over her hips for the 10th time, the motion useless. It was still red. It was still sleeveless. And she was still the only one standing in the entryway of a restaurant so quiet you could hear the clink of ice in a glass from across the room. Her friends, Jessica and Lauren, had promised her this would be different. A real date. A man who was kind, successful, and specifically asked for someone who wasn't a stick figure. As Jessica had put it with a conspiratorial wink. It had all been a lie. She could see them now, tucked into a corner booth near the bar, their shoulders shaking with silent, vicious laughter. Lauren held up her phone, the screen aimed directly at her. They were filming it. The whole cruel spectacle. The punchline had just arrived. However, the man at the table they had pointed her toward was not laughing. He sat with a stillness that was unnerving, his back to the wall, watching her. He watched her see her friends. He watched the flicker of comprehension and horror cross her face. And he did not move a muscle. Now she could not leave. To turn and run would be to give them the exact reaction they wanted. The only way out was through. Amelia took a breath, held her head high, and walked toward the table. Each step was a tiny war against the instinct to flee. The man was dressed in a suit so dark it seemed to absorb the low light of the restaurant. It was tailored with a precision that spoke of obscene expense. His hands rested on the white tablecloth, one on either side of his plate. They were large, clean, and utterly still. A heavy gold ring with a flat, unadorned face glinted on his right pinky finger. As she reached the table, his eyes, the color of dark roast coffee, finally met hers. There was no pity in them. There was no amusement. There was only a flat, cold assessment. "Amelia," he said. It was not a question. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. She nodded, unable to find her own voice. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit." She sat. The motion was stiff, her spine a rod of iron. She refused to look toward the corner booth, to give her so-called friends the satisfaction. She focused on him, on the faint, clean scent of cedarwood and something else, something sharper, that clung to him. A waiter appeared, hovering with 2 leather-bound menus. The man at the table did not look at him. He kept his eyes on Amelia. "We will not be needing those," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "Bring a bottle of the Barolo. The reserve." The waiter blinked, startled. "Sir, that is a very fine." "I know what it is," the man said, the words clipped. "Bring it." The waiter vanished. The silence that fell between them was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. She could feel the vibrating humiliation radiating from her skin. He had seen it all. The setup, the mockery, her pathetic walk of shame across the polished floor. "Your friends," he began, his tone deceptively mild, "find this amusing." Amelia swallowed. "They are not my friends." The words came out stronger than she expected. A flicker of something, interest perhaps, passed through his dark eyes. He leaned forward slightly, the fabric of his suit jacket pulling taut across his broad shoulders. "No," he agreed. "They are not." He looked past her, his gaze sweeping over the restaurant and landing on the corner booth. For a single terrifying second, the placid surface of his control seemed to crack, revealing a depth of cold fury that made the air around their table grow thin and cold. The laughter from the corner stopped. Amelia did not need to turn around to know Jessica and Lauren had felt that look land on them. He brought his attention back to her. "My name is Marco Bellini," he said it simply, as if it were a fact of nature, like gravity or the turning of the earth. "I was told I would be meeting a woman of substance. It seems, for once, I was not lied to." The words hung in the air. A woman of substance. No one had ever called her that. They called her big, heavy, plus-sized. Kind friends used words like curvy. Cruel ones used words she would not allow into her own mind. But substance. That was new. The wine arrived. The sommelier performed the ritual with trembling hands, pouring a taste for Marco. He waved a hand in dismissal, gesturing for the man to pour for Amelia instead. She watched the deep red liquid fill her glass. She did not know what to do, what to say. This was not the script she had prepared for. The script involved a mumbled apology, a hasty retreat, and a long night of crying into a pint of ice cream. "Drink," he commanded softly. She took a sip. The wine was rich and complex, coating her tongue with the taste of dark cherries and earth. It was the most expensive thing she had ever tasted. "They thought to make a fool of me," Marco said, his voice a low confidence. "They used you to do it. This is a profound miscalculation on their part." I am so sorry," she stammered. "I had no idea. They told me." "I know what they told you," he interrupted, his gaze sharp. "Loyalty is a rare commodity. Betrayal is common as dirt. You learn to recognize the difference." He said the word betrayal as if he were intimately familiar with its taste. "What do you do, Amelia?" The question was so jarringly normal it threw her off balance. "I'm an archivist," she said, "at the university's Special Collections Library." He considered this for a moment. "You preserve history. You handle things that are old and fragile. And valuable," she added, finding a sliver of her professional pride. "Things that tell a story." "Everything tells a story," he murmured, his eyes holding hers. "The question is whether you are skilled enough to read it." He glanced again toward the corner where her former friends were now trying very hard to appear invisible. "Their story is short and pathetic. It ends tonight." A chill went down Amelia's spine that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. This man spoke with an authority that was absolute. He did not hope or suggest. He declared. He finished his own glass of wine in one smooth motion and stood, placing a few $100 bills on the table. It was more than enough to cover the entire bottle. "We are leaving." Panic seized her. "Leaving? But we just—" "This was never about dinner," he said, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. The contact was electric, a point of warmth and pressure that sent a shock through her system. He guided her toward the exit, his body a solid wall between her and the rest of the room. She did not dare look at Jessica and Lauren. She did not need to. She could feel their stunned silence follow her out the door. The cool night air of the city hit her face. She expected him to say goodnight, to perhaps call her a cab and send her on her way. The strange, humiliating ordeal over. She had survived. That was enough. But a sleek black sedan, the kind with windows so dark you could not see inside, pulled up to the curb as if summoned. A man in a dark suit got out of the driver's side and opened the back door. Marco looked down at her. The streetlights cast his face in sharp angles and deep shadows. The faint scar she had not noticed before, a thin white line along his jaw, was suddenly visible. "Get in the car, Amelia." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Where are we going?" "The people your friends work for have an interest in me," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "By sitting at my table, you now have an interest in them. You are coming with me because it is no longer safe for you to be anywhere else." That was the moment the floor of her world did not just crack. It disintegrated entirely. This was not a rescue. This was a capture. The cruel joke had ended, but something far more dangerous had just begun. She had walked into that restaurant as the punchline, but she was leaving as a piece on a board she did not understand, claimed by a man whose stillness was more frightening than any overt threat. Inside the car, the world muted. The sounds of the city faded behind the thick glass. The seats were soft leather, and the air smelled of that same cedarwood and cold steel. Marco sat beside her, not touching, but his presence filled the space, a dense note of gravity that pulled everything toward him. "Jessica and Lauren," Amelia began, her voice trembling slightly. "Who do they work for?" "A man named Petrov," Marco said, his gaze fixed on the rain-slicked streets ahead. "A brute who thinks insults are a substitute for strategy. He runs the docks in Red Hook. Or he did. His territory is shrinking." The casual way he spoke of territory, as if it were a business asset, sent another wave of cold fear through her. She was an archivist. She dealt in paper and ink. in the quiet, dusty decay of history. This was a language she did not speak. Why would they do this? To me, it was not about you, Marco said, turning his head to look at her. In the enclosed space, his presence was overwhelming. It was about me. A message. They think I am getting soft, distracted. They arranged this display to mock me at a place they knew my rivals would be watching. To show that anyone could get close to me. Even for a joke. She felt a fresh wave of humiliation, this time mingled with anger. She was not a person to them. She was a prop, a tool for insult. Your friends were paid, Marco continued, his voice flat. They were given your name. They were told to make it as public, as embarrassing as possible. How do you know all this? He gave her a look that made her feel impossibly naive. It is my business to know. It is my business to understand who is loyal and who is a snake. I have known about Petrov's interest in your friends for a week. I did not know what form his message would take. Now I do. The car moved smoothly through the city, a silent predator in the night. They drove for what felt like an hour, heading toward the glittering towers of Manhattan. She watched the familiar streets of her life blur past the window, feeling more disconnected from them than if she were on another planet. I don't understand what you want with me, she finally said, the words barely audible. For now, I want you to be safe, he said. Petrov is not subtle. Once he realizes his joke has failed, that I was not humiliated but instead left with you, he will get angry. He might try to clean up his mess. That includes you. The car descended into a private underground garage, the heavy steel door rolling shut behind them with a definitive thud. They were sealed in. He led her to a private elevator that opened directly into a penthouse apartment. The space was vast and minimalist, all glass and steel and shades of gray. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking panorama of the city lights, a river of diamonds sparkling below. It was beautiful, but it felt cold, sterile, like a museum exhibit of a life rather than a home. There were no photographs, no clutter, no personal touches. Only space and silence and the view. He walked to a bar carved from a single piece of black marble and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed one to her. Whiskey, he said. You look like you need it. She did. She took a sip, the fiery liquid burning a welcome path down her throat. It steadied her shaking hands. You can stay here tonight, he said, gesturing vaguely to the massive space. There are guest rooms. In the morning, we will decide what comes next. She looked at him, standing against the backdrop of the glittering city, a king in his sterile castle. He was offering her protection, but it felt like a cage, a beautiful, expensive cage. You have a choice, Amelia, he said, as if reading her thoughts. I can have my driver take you home right now. You can go back to your apartment, lock your door, and pretend tonight never happened. I will handle Petrov. You will be out of it. It was an out. Clean break. She could take it. She could run back to her quiet life of old books and careful routines. She could forget the feel of his hand on her back, the cold fury in his eyes, the way he said her name. But she thought of Jessica and Lauren. She thought of their laughter, of the phone recording her humiliation. She thought of the man named Petrov, a man who used people like pawns. If she went home, would she ever really be safe? Or would she spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the consequences of a joke she was never in on? And then she thought of Marco. He had not laughed. He had not offered pity. He had offered her a glass of the finest wine, met her eyes, and called her a woman of substance. In the face of public ridicule, he had shown her a form of respect so profound and unexpected it had completely disarmed her. It was a cold respect, a dangerous one, but it was real. No, she said, her voice clear and firm. I will stay. The decision hung in the air between them. It was a turning point, a line crossed. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She had made a choice. Marco nodded slowly, a flicker of that same unreadable emotion in his eyes. All right, he said, but you should understand something. In my world, protection is not a gift. It is a debt. and all debts are eventually paid. He showed her to a guest room that was larger than her entire apartment. The bed was king-sized, the sheets had a thread count she could not even guess, and the adjoining bathroom was a study in marble and chrome. It was impersonal and luxurious. She felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. Sleep did not come easily. She lay in the dark, listening to the silence of the apartment. It was a weighted silence, full of unspoken rules and invisible threats. She thought about Marco's words. Protection is not a gift. It is a debt. What could she possibly have that a man like him would want? She was an archivist. She knew about vellum and bookbinding, about the chemical composition of 17th century ink. Her skills were for a world that was quiet, slow, and dead. His world was loud, fast, and lethal. The next morning, she found him in the large, open-plan living area, standing by the window with a cup of coffee, already dressed in another immaculate suit. He looked as if he had not slept at all. "My men looked into your friends," he said without preamble. "Jessica works as a hostess at a club Petrov owns. Lauren has a significant gambling debt with one of his bookies." They were not hard to persuade. The news landed like a stone in her stomach. It was all so sordid, so transactional. Their friendship had been sold for a pittance. "What will happen to them?" she asked, not sure if she wanted to know the answer. "They have proven themselves to be disloyal," Marco said simply. "They will be treated accordingly." The finality in his tone left no room for questions. He gestured to a small table where a breakfast of coffee, pastries, and fruit had been laid out. "Eat. We have work to do." "Work? I told you all debts are paid," he said, turning from the window to face her. "Petrov has something I want. An old shipping ledger from my grandfather's time. It details the original agreements for the territories on the west side. He is using a falsified version to make a claim with the other families. The original ledger proves he is lying. But it is written in an old Sicilian dialect, and parts of it are in a code my grandfather used." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "It is old. It is fragile. It is valuable. And it tells a story. I need someone who can read it. Someone who understands how to handle such things without destroying them. I need an archivist." There it was. The price of her safety. The other shoe dropping with a deafening thud. He was not just protecting her. He was using her. Her specific, niche skills were her currency in this new, terrifying world. "You knew," she said, the realization dawning on her. "When I told you what I did for a living, you already knew you could use me." "I knew it was a possibility," he corrected her, his expression unreadable. "It was a fortunate coincidence. For me." She had a choice. She could refuse. But what then? Would he still protect her? Or would the debt be called in another way? She felt a surge of anger, but it was quickly tempered by a cold, practical fear. She was in his house, in his world, playing by his rules. "And if I help you," she said, her voice steady, "what happens to Petrov?" "He will be treated accordingly," Marco said again, the words carrying the weight of a death sentence. She was being asked to be an accomplice to whatever violence would follow. To use her knowledge, her life's work, to help this man settle a bloody score. This was the morally gray line she had only read about in books. Now she was standing right on it. She looked at him, at the absolute certainty in his posture, the cold calculation in his eyes. He was a monster, a creature of violence and power. But he was the only thing standing between her and another monster, one who had already used her as a joke. It was a choice between two evils. She chose the one who had, for a fleeting moment, looked at her and seen substance. "Show me the book," she said. The ledger was beautiful and terrifying. The leather cover was cracked with age. The pages within were thin as onion skin, filled with elegant, spidery script. It smelled of dust, time, and secrets. They worked at a large mahogany table in what he called his study. It was the only room in the penthouse that felt lived in, lined with shelves of books that were clearly read, not just for decoration. For hours, They sat in silence, broken only by the rustle of a page or her soft request for better light. She was in her element here. The fear receded, replaced by the familiar focus of her profession. She analyzed the ink, the paper, the pressure of the pen. The code was complex, a mix of numerical substitutions and regional phrases that only a native of a specific village in Sicily would understand. But her mind saw the patterns, the logic beneath the chaos. Marco watched her work. He did not hover or interrupt. He simply sat across from her, observing with that same unnerving stillness. She could feel his gaze on her, but it was different now. It was not just assessing. It was appreciative. He was watching a master at her craft, and he recognized it. Late into the night, she finally cracked it. "Here," she said, her finger tracing a line of script. "It's a list of payments, witnesses. It's the proof. He says your grandfather signed the territory over to Petrov's family as payment for a debt." She pointed to the signature. "But the ink composition here is different from the rest of the page. It's a forgery. A good one, but not perfect. The iron gall ink is from a later period. And this name here, a witness. This man was dead 5 years before this was supposedly signed." A slow, cold smile touched Marco's lips. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and it was not a pleasant sight. It was predatory. "You are very good at your job, Amelia." "I know," she said, meeting his gaze. The power dynamic had shifted just slightly. In this room, with this book, she was not a victim. She was an expert. She was valuable. "What now?" she asked. "Now I call a meeting," he said, standing up, "and I present the evidence." The meeting was to take place at a neutral location, an old Italian restaurant in the Bronx that had been closed for the night. Marco told her she had to come. "You are the evidence," he explained, his voice grim. "You are the one who can explain the forgery. They need to hear it from you." Walking into that restaurant felt like walking into a lion's den. It was filled with men who looked like Marco. Men in expensive suits with still eyes and heavy hands. They were the heads of the other families. At a table in the center sat Petrov, a large, florid man with a brutish face and small, mean eyes. The air was thick with tension. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs, but she focused on Marco's presence beside her. He moved through the room like he owned it, his confidence an invisible shield. He placed the ledger on the table. "Petrov has made a claim," Marco announced to the room. "He says my family owes him the West Side docks. He has presented a document. I have the original. It tells a different story." He looked at Amelia. It was her turn. Her voice shook for a moment, but then she found her footing. She was a professional. This was her area of expertise. She laid out the facts, her tone becoming more confident with each word. She explained the ink, the paper, the fraudulent signature, the name of the dead witness. She spoke clearly, clinically, laying the truth bare for all to see. When she finished, the room was silent. Petrov's face was a mask of purple fury. He lunged to his feet, his chair crashing to the floor. "This is a trick. This fat girl, what does she know? She's lying for him." Before anyone could react, Marco moved. It was not a rush. It was a flow of surgical, deliberate violence. He backhanded Petrov across the face, the sound a sharp crack that echoed in the silent room. Petrov staggered back, blood trickling from his lip. Marco did not raise his voice. He did not have to. His words were cold and quiet, but they carried more weight than any shout. "You brought this woman into our world as an insult. You put her in my path, and she has ended you. The docks are mine. You will pay tribute, and you will never ever speak to her or of her again." He looked at the other men. "This is my word." No one argued. The matter was settled. Later, back in the silent penthouse, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving Amelia feeling hollowed out and exhausted. She had walked into a den of killers and, with her knowledge of ink and paper, had helped topple one of them. Her old life was not just gone. It was a distant memory from another lifetime. Marco stood by the window looking out at the city. "You were good in there," he said, his back to her. You were not afraid. I was terrified, she admitted, her voice raw. He turned to face her. Fear is not a weakness. Acting in spite of it is a strength. He walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away. The space between them crackled with a new kind of tension. It was no longer just about danger and death. It was something else, something more personal. He called you fat, Marco said, his voice a low growl. He looked at you and saw a target, a joke. He did not see the mind that took apart his lies piece by piece. He did not see the courage it took to walk into that room and speak the truth to a room full of monsters. He took another step, closing the distance between them. He raised a hand, not to touch her, but to gently move a stray strand of hair from her face. His fingers brushed her cheek, the touch surprisingly gentle. I see it, he whispered, his dark eyes searching hers. I see you, Amelia. In that moment, she was not the punchline. She was not a prop. She was not a debt to be paid. She was Amelia, and she was seen by the most dangerous man she had ever met. He leaned in and his lips met hers. The kiss was not soft or romantic. It was a claim. It was a promise of danger and protection, of violence and loyalty. It was the language of his world, and for the first time she did not need a translation. She understood it perfectly. When he pulled away, the silence in the room was different. It was not empty. It was full of a shared, terrifying truth. You have a choice, he said again, his voice rough. I can give you a new name, a new life. Anywhere you want to go. You will be safe. You will be free. She looked at him, at this cold, lethal man who had shown her a respect she had never known. She thought of her quiet, lonely life before, a life of being invisible or, worse, a target for ridicule. This new world was terrifying, but in it she was not invisible. In it she had substance. She did not want a new life. She wanted this one, with him. She reached up and rested her hand on his chest, right over his heart. No, she said softly. I am staying. A barely perceptible change occurred in his expression. The hardness in his eyes softened, just for a second, revealing a vulnerability she never would have thought possible. He covered her hand with his own, his grip firm and sure. It was not the end of the danger. It was the beginning of everything else.